Would you start?
Oh, okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Jocelyn Lee, the president of the Millburn Short Hill Chinese Association. First of all, I would like to thank all the candidates to join us for the Zoom meeting forum tonight, and April for organizing it, and Eden to host the meeting. Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association was founded in 2005 as a nonprofit organization. MSHCA was formed for purpose of promoting Chinese tradition and cultures, and participating in and contributing to the local community activity at Millburn Township. The association was a strong give back approach by hosting events and organizing activity open to all Millburn Short Hills residents and beyond, not limited to the Chinese community. So this candidate forum is part of the effort to give the candidates for Township Committee an opportunity to answer questions of interest to the association member, and is open to all. The associate does not and will not endorse any candidates. This session is for information only. For our members and others in our community to have an opportunity to hear directly from the candidates for Township Committee and be able to make more informed decision before they cast their variable votes. So now I'm turning over to our moderator, Eden Choi.
Thank you, Justin. Good evening, everyone. I'm Eden Kai. I have lived in Short Hills with my husband and 2 children for over 7 years. I'm pleased to be the moderator for tonight's Township Committee Candidate Forum. We all understand that this is a consequential election for our town. We hope this event can help the residents get to know each candidate better and decide whom we want to vote for the next 3 years on Township Committee. So before I start, I'd like to explain the format of this event. We'll begin with introduction by candidates first, followed by a Q&A session and closing statements. For the opening statement, each candidate has a maximum of 2 minutes. My assistant, Peter Liao, has a timer on his screen. After the introduction, I'll ask 4 prepared questions, which have been shared with candidates in advance. For each question, each group will have a maximum of 3 minutes to answer. Either candidate in the group can answer solely or supplement each other's answer. And then we'll open the floor to the audience Q&A. The audience can submit questions through the chat box to the host after the 4 prepared questions. We'll select 1 to 2 questions from the chat box, depending on time. Each candidate can raise their hand to answer the audience question. Finally, each candidate will be given an opportunity for a closing statement. Okay, let's start. So for the opening statement, Oyin Frank will go first, and then Diane, David, followed by Michael and Annette.
All right, I guess I'll go first. Hi, my name is Frank Sacmandy, and I would like to start by thanking the Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association for sponsoring this forum. Through my 15 years of professional experience as an IT infrastructure engineer, I have learned how to build consensus to address mission-critical problems with diverse teams across global offices. I have experience managing 8-figure budgets, negotiating large contracts, and managing complex transitions. My husband Jerry and I built our home here in Millburn with the intention of starting a family and enjoying the quality of life that we all chose this community for. I never imagined I would run for any sort of office, but after being alerted to Millburn's overdevelopment issues from a flyer left on my car, I was compelled to act. After attending Township Committee meetings, I was troubled by the secrecy and utter disdain for resident input. The fact that the contents of this monumental fair share housing agreement were kept from residents only shows how our Township Committee has mishandled the matter every step of the way. I believe that the proper local governance begins with treating residents with honesty, respect, and civility, and I pledge to do just that. For this local election, I joined the Millburn Republican Party because they stand for transparent, sensible development that is driven by community input and respects the character of our town, while at the same time fully satisfying our affordable housing obligation. The party is not beholden to special interests or the agendas of developers. I'm also proud to be able to say that this year's Millburn Republican ticket is by far the most diverse and inclusive ticket in this race. As for any alignment to National Party, I have been a registered Democrat and a registered Republican at various times in my life, but for the most part, I have been unaffiliated. Because like the majority of Americans, my political positions are moderate. I believe that neither party has all of the solutions and that a better way forward can always be achieved by fostering discussions with one another as fellow human beings rather than as partisans clinging to party orthodoxy. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Oyin?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association and all of you who are here tonight. For those who may not have met me, my name is Onyo Wolabi. I'm a mom of 3 school-aged children, and we have lived in Millburn for 15 years. I work as a research scientist in the oncology space. I'm Nigerian born and immigrated to the US when I was 10. I love this country and what it has afforded me and my family. I have been giving back to my community all my adult life. My volunteer work has resulted in improving the schools, scout troops, advocacy organizations, and churches where I have served. I was elected to the Millburn's Board of Education for 4 years, and I accomplished major projects as chair of the property and personnel committees. One example is my work on the Washington School Purchase and Development. In addition, I served on the Environmental Commission and was service unit manager for the Girl Scouts. And I was also the former chairwoman for the Nigerian American Public Affairs. The skills that I acquired in my professional life have prepared me to serve on a township committee. I manage groups of experts, facilitate teams to reach productive decisions, deal with large-scale clinical problems, and determine effective solutions. One of my proudest moments was when a well-respected former school board member called me a unifier. She worked closely with me for years and observed how I brought different sides together with respect and dignity. What I also learned from my board service was the value of community input and how important this is to shaping the right decisions. I will unify and include when serving as your township committee member. My vision for Millburn is one that brings sorely needed balance, keeping the character of Millburn's neighborhood intact, ensuring that affordable housing is provided responsibly, focusing the township committee on the safety of every member of our community, and maintaining a sustainable infrastructure for township, fighting and also fighting for our children and keeping our schools among the best in New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you, Oyin. Dan? And David?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you to the Chinese American Association and welcome everybody on Zoom. I am Deputy Mayor Diane Fall-Eglow, a lifelong resident of Millburn. We have 3 grown children. I will be found on line C as an independent candidate with Dave Morrow. I have volunteered for our town in many capacities over 30 years. I have sat on every board and every subcommittee while serving on the Township Committee. I have not missed a meeting in 6 years. I'm committed to protecting our town's integrity and controlling our zoning and planning destiny. I understand how municipal government functions. It is not like the private sector. There are many constraints that come into every decision. I've listened to residents and I've made many accomplishments that I've been asked to look over. The removal of the raised parking, new stop signs, better lighting downtown for pedestrian safety, the installation of the library turf field, the ordinance allowing dogs in Taylor Park, installation of speed humps around South Mountain neighborhood. I'll continue to advocate for more speed humps around town. I started Millburn's YouTube channel, allowing access to our meetings and enabling us to be COVID ready for Zoom. I started the flood mitigation subcommittee. I started the diversity and arts committee. I've introduced plans for the Short Hills train station to better organize traffic and pedestrian circulation. I've introduced important environmental ordinances. I will formally introduce an ordinance for commercial businesses that want to come into town to facilitate their board applications. I've refused to cave to party patronage when Essex County demanded I choose from their preferred list of professionals. It was Tara Prupus and myself who insisted we terminate our affordable housing attorney. This was finalized at the last Township Committee meeting. We immediately started the interview process to hire a new attorney who will represent Millburn Township, putting Millburn's interests first. I absolutely understand our community's discontent and not understanding the risk. Am I done? Okay, sorry.
Hello, I'm David Morrow. Thank you to the Millburn Chinese Association for organizing this forum. I'm an independent candidate for Township Committee. My wife and I have lived in Millburn over 9 years, close to 9 years, I should say. Our daughter is a sophomore at the Millburn High School. I served over 2 years on the Millburn Planning Board. I'm a registered independent and have been all of my adult life. I don't believe in the exclusionary mindset of partisan politics. I do believe in fiscal conservation and a progressive social outlook. Your independent candidate slate with Diane Eglow, an experienced elected government official and lifelong resident, and my years of business operations management and financial analysis, and decades of professional experience in commercial and multifamily real estate land use, provides Millburn Short Hills with the best equipped and most experienced team to offer effective, thoughtful analysis and reasonable, pragmatic solutions to the challenges our community faces. Millburn Township needs competent, committed, mature individuals that understand complicated contract negotiations, have worked with multiple municipal attorneys, analyzed multi-layered operations budgets, and interacted with business administrators. Diane and I are those people. Now is not the time for on-the-job training. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan and David. Next, Michael and Annette.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association for hosting this forum tonight. My name is Annette Romano, and I am a proud Democrat. I am one of the Democratic candidates running for Millburn Township Committee. I believe in democratic values, giving back, and advocating for those that can't advocate for themselves. I've been able to accomplish all this while living right here in Millburn. I am a lifelong resident of Millburn who went through the public school system and graduated from Millburn High School. I was a manager of the then Howard Savings Bank in Short Hills, which is where I met my husband. We were married and we raised our family here. My children also attended the public schools. I volunteered with the schools, serving on various PTO committees. I started to volunteer with the American Red Cross shortly after 9/11. I later became an employee of the American Red Cross as the Director of Health and Safety. This allowed me the opportunity of becoming more involved in the community and meeting residents. I also began my service with the Township's Local Assistance Board and the Senior Citizen Advisory Board. I founded the food pantry in 2019 and continue to manage it today. The pantry was critical during COVID when many of our residents lost their jobs. Giving back and helping people in this community has been a longtime passion of mine. I come from a family of public service. I'm currently employed by New Jersey Transit in the employee development and training area of human resources. I believe in bringing my skills together. I believe my skills in bringing people together, unify versus dividing, and this will help me if I'm elected to serve the township. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me. I'll make it unanimous and also thank the Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association for hosting this event. I'm Michael Cohen and I'm running as one of the Democrats of our Township Committee. I moved to Millburn Short Hills just after I was married in 1988, so I've lived here almost 34 years. I raised my 2 sons here. My older son is 32, went through all the public school systems. My younger son is 29 and went through the public school system through middle school. He has special needs, so he went out of district for high school. I spent the bulk of my career at JP Morgan Chase, so I commuted back and forth every day, so I'm pretty familiar with what that's like. at JP Morgan Chase, I was a project manager in technology. And for the first half of my career, and then subsequently moved over to manage government reporting. I've worked with large teams, and I'm a consensus builder. After I retired a few years ago, I got to pursue one of my interests that I'd always had, which was to become active again in politics. I started looking at the candidates running for Congress at the time, and then just became increasingly more involved. I'm the treasurer of the Millburn Short Hills Democrats, and I've been the treasurer for the last two campaigns, when Tara ran and when Maggie and Sanjeev ran. I'll get to the issues because they're all represented in the questions, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette, Michael. So let's move to the Q&A session. My first question is, our community has become increasingly diverse, and this trend is likely to continue with more Asian Americans move into the community. What do you see as the opportunities and challenges with this demographic shift? What specific policies do you have that would further impact diversity? So Annette and Michael will go first, followed by Dan and David, and Owen and Frank will go last.
Okay, so let me just start out by saying I'm certainly excited about the change. Millburn has changed quite a bit in all the time I've lived here, and by becoming increasingly diverse, it's become a much more interesting place to live. And we have a much better opportunity to learn from each other and each other's cultures. As for representation, the way that happens is most of the committees that run the township for all the different things, from the library to the environmental commission, to all of them, they're always looking for volunteers. And the way that starts is by people filling out the volunteer interest form and then are interviewed for the various committees. So certainly the opportunities are there for whoever it is that wants to participate. As I said, they're always looking for volunteers. As for running for office, there are several ways to do that. Again, as individuals become interested and more involved and get to know the people, I know how our process works, where we interview all of the people that are interested in running and then make a decision by a closed ballot, and then the majority is the person that is nominated. But even aside from that, as we can see from this year, somebody can certainly always run as an independent if that is their interest. As for specific policies to increase diversity, I'm not sure how to do that. It's not something that you can legislate. But I think that just as the town changes and the population changes, it's just a natural course of things to occur. You want to add to that?
Sure. I just want to add that I think the diversity in our community is what makes Millburn Short Hills a great place to live. I'm happy to see an increase in more diverse restaurants and a diverse population of business owners. I also want to add that the Democrats were first to put someone of color on the township committee. It's been wonderful to get to know Committeeman Benayak and his amazing family. It's just too bad that the Republicans brought forth the Republican recall to try to tarnish his reputation. That's all.
Thank you. And Dan, David?
Hi. Millburn's township population is more diverse than ever. Our changing demographics is celebrated in many ways. We have new school holidays that afford us the opportunities to learn about other cultures. Kids have schoolmates from all over the world. Young people are free to express their identities. Not that many years ago, Jewish people were not allowed to move into certain areas of town. Realtors refused to show homes to Jews. Thankfully, this is no longer the case. Our realtors are as diverse as our population, which is what has helped change Millburn to a much better community. When elected, Dave and I will approve the formation of a charter commission to allow our local government to be nonpartisan. This is what our residents want. This will allow opportunities for interested residents to run for the township committee. Then board appointments will be merit-based, not party patronage. Running as independents is a start. Several years ago, I started CEDA, Cultural Engagement, Diversity, and Arts Committee. Many of you who lived in town recalling us implementing Millburn's paper mill history and decorating large water wheels. Our first project had over 75 community groups participating. We then had a huge town-wide celebration in Taylor Park. I was the first mayor to raise the Pride flag, which is a worldwide support of the LGBTQ community. These are small yet important acknowledgements that accept our ever-changing community. Our town boards, planning, zoning, and many subcommittees are more representative of our community than ever before. Thankfully, we are far from a stagnant community. We should not be classified by race, sexual identity, religion, or party politics. As we encourage our children to be open-minded and free thinkers, we as adults must also continue to grow and appreciate the ever-changing landscape we call home. No candidate should have to be identified as anything but the best choice for Millburn. Thank you.
Millburn is a diverse community. We need to continue to embrace that and be inclusionary in everything we do. Thank you.
So Frank and Owen?
Sure. So first, I embrace diversity because it adds to the vibrant and welcoming nature of our community. In fact, my husband Jerry Kung is a second-generation Chinese American. When we were looking to plant roots, it was very important for us to find a community where we would feel a sense of belonging. Millburn fit that criteria perfectly. There is a critical need for greater diversity of thought on the various boards and commissions. I have spoken with many residents who were eager and willing to serve, but were never selected due to their political affiliation or lack of connections. They find the current system unwelcoming and are discouraged from applying. We must fix this broken system. It only encourages political patronage and stacks important boards with party loyalists who rubber stamp decisions. If elected, we will reach out when seeking volunteers. Do you know that Millburn used to send a directory of various boards, commissions, and affinity groups to every household? We should revive this practice to reach the widest, most diverse set of residents and draw from the deepest pool of talent. We will make the selection process fair and transparent by ensuring proper vetting of all residents who wish to serve. And finally, America is at its best when all cultures learn from one another through mutual respect and understanding, instead of being siloed within different sub-communities. I would initiate an annual multicultural fair to celebrate our town's diversity. At this fair, all cultural organizations would be invited to promote the various events that they host each year. Oyen?
Yeah, thank you, Frank. I am part of the changing demographics of this community. You know, we chose Millburn because our family puts the education of our children as first priority. My different cultural and educational life experiences and my ways of approaching problems has been enriched, honored, and respected in every role where I've served my community. I felt, welcomed by this community, and I will welcome each of you in the same way. I've been elected on the Board of Education. I've been appointed to the Environmental Commission. I hope my election to the Township Committee would encourage other minority candidates to find the courage to put themselves forward, to volunteer and run for elected office to serve Millburn. My lens is naturally attuned to inclusion and diversity by virtue of my background. I will make diversity and inclusion a cornerstone of my decision-making. I support Frank's idea of a multicultural fair to bring awareness to the wider community. This builds on what we are already doing in our schools with International Day. This will extend that event to the entire community. On the Township Committee, I will focus on our policy of communicating and interacting with the entire community and ensuring that we reach all of you proactively. We pledge to listen. That is the only way we can truly understand the desires of the community and serve you. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Let's move to next question. So the recent Township Committee meeting voted to terminate Millburn Fair Share Housing Attorney Edward Buzak. How do you interpret the Fair Share Housing Center Judge Cynthia Santmario's response to this decision? And what do you see as next steps in our fair share housing process? So for this question, we'll start with Owen, Frank, and move to Dan and David. Annette and Michael will be last.
So Judge Santamoro's response to Attorney Buzak's termination is a positive development. She ignored Fair Share's objection to postponing the final hearing. So it seems that she is being cautious given all of the irregularities in our case. Our township must retain the best legal professionals. I have spoken with numerous municipal land use attorneys who believe that we have sound legal footing for implementing the plan on our website without requiring Fair Share's consent. In fact, Tara Prupis has asked me for attorneys. I have provided her with a few names and have many more to offer in the future. Oyen and I are the only candidates in this race whose incentives are fully aligned in maintaining the long-term quality of our schools and protecting them against overdevelopment. Oyen and I have young families, and we will be relying on the schools for decades to come. Our campaign also made a conscious decision not to accept any contributions from local developers to avoid even the appearance of any conflicts of interest. Actions speak louder than words. Oyen and I took action to express our objections to the settlement by writing to the court. Dave Morrow is the only other candidate besides us who did so. I will take an analytical approach in evaluating revisions to the agreement. In my video with Jerry, we explained how terrible our agreement was compared to similar towns. Millburn has been asked to satisfy 70% of its unmet need through the income segregated dump housing project and rezoning that imposes excessively high densities of up to 40 units an acre. Our proposal scraps the dump project and limits densities to 16 units an acre on all zones near single-family neighborhoods. Let's look at Judge Santamoro's town of North Caldwell. Like Millburn, North Caldwell was long recognized as a fully developed community, and they did not build any affordable housing prior to 2015. Their settlement satisfies a mere 18% of their unmet need entirely through zoning changes of less than 10 units an acre. We will be posting the full details at our campaign website, oyenandfrank.com. North Caldwell is proof that even towns that built no affordable housing prior to 2015 were still able to prevent overdevelopment. Democrats' claims that Millburn was in a position of weakness because prior Republican administrations kicked the can down the road are patently false. We are in a position of weakness because we were represented by incompetent and inexperienced TC members, all handpicked by Romano, Cohen, and their Democratic machine. It was under majority Democrat rule, including Diane Eglow, that Millburn's housing plan was filed 3 days too late in 2018, leading to this irresponsible outcome. Please read the primary sources on our website. Do not believe the false narratives peddled by our opponents on either the settlement process or our alternative plans. Our opponents all favor or voted for the overdevelopment of our town. If we present the judge with a direct comparison showing how unfair our agreement is and that our citizens' constitutional rights were violated, we will have a much better chance of success in rolling back the most disastrous portions of our settlement. Facts matter, data matters, and our legal rights matter. This is how we will force a revised settlement, and this is what we bring to the table.
Frank,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Your time's up. Next, we have Dan and David.
Thank you, Eden. Our response to Judge Santamoro's adjournment of the hearing on litigants' right is that it provides the opportunity to evaluate and amend the existing flawed settlement agreement and craft with newly retained legal counsel, which are being interviewed now, one of which I recommended to the Township Committee, a substantive argument for addressing the failures to disclose to the Millburn Short Hills community, as well as the considerable conflict of interest and disproportionate zoning decisions that were taken during the original settlement agreement negotiations. We, the independent candidates, have consulted with professional land planners, civil land use engineers, and other town administrators about some best practices as next steps in approaching the court and in discussion with the Fair Share Housing Center. Though we realize this should have been done 3 to 4 years ago, we must learn from our mistakes and take a proactive approach, make thoroughly vetted professional hiring decisions, and engage the Citizens Committee on Affordable Housing in our negotiations going forward. We must be logical and realistic about the interplay between various levels of judicial and governmental bodies, as well as the Fair Share Housing Center that can exert influence over the outcomes in Millburn Short Hills. There'll be limitations to what we can do and can be achieved in this short, critical time period. We must act with prudence before Millburn Township, as party to the compliance agreement, enter our argument before the Superior Court of New Jersey. Thank you.
And I would just like to add that Frank's inexperience is showing, because Fair Share Housing absolutely has a seat at the table and must approve any settlement. you have to speak to land use attorneys and planners. You cannot just make this plan up and show up in court and thrust it upon the judge. It doesn't work that way.
Thank you.
Next, Annette and Michael, go ahead.
Thank you. Judge Santomoro is the new judge assigned by the court. I can't speak for her, so I don't want to interpret her response. I think we can all say that the settlement was not the best plan for the residents of Millburn Short Hills. There is nothing fair about the fair share housing laws. We need to work with our legislators to fix it. If elected, I pledge to do that. I'm not in favor of this plan, nor was I in favor of Woodland Road. We must come up with a comprehensive plan, and it must be consistent throughout our entire community. We need to meet our fair share housing obligation, but we need to meet it in a responsible way. And yes, for years, the Republicans' plan was to kick the can down the road. This is what created this mess. We're going back 30 plus years. We must work to meet our requirements in stages and make sure that we do not put an undue burden on our infrastructure and school system. We need to work together to solve this issue. We are a welcoming community that needs to meet its obligation. I'm glad to see that the Township Committee has started the process of creating a resident advisory committee to represent the citizens on fair share housing in our community. The guidelines of this committee should be outlined in advance of the formation of the committee. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'll add is that it's nice to be optimistic that the new judge granted the delay, but I don't see how she could have not done that because we would have had no lawyer at the time, and that clearly would have been unfair. So, you know, optimistically, I hope that's right, but I just don't think so. And we certainly know that since all parties do have to agree, as Diane said, to any change in the settlement, we could see from the proposal, from the letter that the Fair Share Housing Committee wrote, that they're not about to do that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, candidates. So next question. Do you think our current property tax rate is reasonable? If you are elected to serve on the Township Committee, would you propose to make any changes? Why and why not? For this question, Dan and David will go first, and then Annette, Michael, Owen, and Frank will go last.
Ready?
Dan?
Okay. First of all, I'm honored that our opponents are now using our words. Clearly, we're on the right track and a lot of issues here. So thank you. Your tax bill has 5 categories, 4 of which we have no control over: the library, the Board of Ed, the county open space, and the county portion of taxes, which is 24%. That leaves only 23% of the pie for the municipality. Of that, 53% goes directly to salary and benefits. The remaining dollars pay for services we provide in various departments. Everything the DPW is responsible for: snow plowing, tree removal and trimming, storm management, leaf collections. Then we have contracted garbage and recycling, our joint sewer, our joint 911 emergency services. Any cuts here would mean a cut in your services. As it is, many other towns, residents pay for these services, like leaf collection and garbage. Millburn Township provides these at a contracted and negotiated economy of scale, all for our benefit. Millburn is in excellent financial shape and has not raised this municipal portion of your tax bill for 2 years. As I stated, the Millburn Township local government does not control the county portion. That being said, Millburn Township does pay an outsized amount of our municipal tax to Essex County, more than the denser towns and other cities around. We support taking an in-depth look at the best way to arrive at a more appropriate share for Millburn Township. It is unacceptable that we pay the most and get the least back from Essex County. While we do not have any county parks in the township, we would advocate for Essex County to contribute a large percentage when the Orange Reservoir flood mitigation project is approved. Essex County should also provide flood management within our borders to help alleviate the burden of our taxpayers. Perhaps we should review the long-standing process Millburn Township's property reevaluation, including the understanding the wishes of our residents. Currently, property appraisals are infrequently assessed only at a minimum required by law, not when perhaps the homeowners change ownership. Is that really the best solution? So there are a lot of things we should be looking into. Unfortunately, we have very little control over the biggest part of the pie.
As Diane spoke about, there is very little of the actual tax revenue that we can control, but we will absolutely take a look at wherever we can, getting economies of scale. And certainly we are going to lobby Essex County to give back some of those tax revenues that we pay to them, because we do not get enough support from Essex County. Thank you.
Next, Annette and Michael.
Sure. So as has been stated, I would say the same thing. We only control a small portion of the overall taxes. And it is to the credit of the Township Committee that the municipal part, the part that we do control, has not been raised for 2 years. That going forward, the question asked about whether we would go on the record for the future, that's hard to say. I'm a fiscal conservative and would certainly take a hard look at any increase in taxes, and at the outset would oppose it unless there was some strong reason. It would be foolish to assume, though, as time marches on and various contracts are renegotiated, that salaries won't go up and the cost of healthcare is rising. We'll have to take a look at that and weigh that against the excellent services that we provide, and discuss that with the community to make a judgment as to how to spend the money. We certainly don't want to reduce public safety when we negotiate with the police and the fire.
And I just want to add that through our county and state relationships, our township committee has been able to bring back over $6 million. And just recently, Governor Cody announced another $2 million for the paper mill. So it's all about working with our legislature, with our elected officials.
Thank you. Owen and Frank.
Yes, I'll take this one. Millburn ranks second in the state for its high property taxes, which is a reflection of our high property values. Our 2022 certified tax rate is 1.943% of assessed value. So on a $1 million property, you will pay $19,430 in taxes. Our property taxes go towards funding county government, municipal government, and the school district. About 25% goes to Essex County, 25% goes to our municipal government and library, and the remaining 50% towards our school. The Township Committee has control over the 25% of the total property taxes that you pay. This includes police and fire, emergency services, trash and snow removal, senior services, libraries, animal control, and many other local services. Before we discuss adjustments to the tax rate, it is critical for us to have an integrated plan. We must incorporate standard practices from the business world and compile a unified strategic plan for the future of our town. This plan should indicate specific measurable milestones that allow the community to track progress towards completion. In an inflationary environment, a strategic plan will be our guiding star to make good progress on all the fronts that are critical to residents. We can also make more informed cost-benefit analysis to better understand prioritization for medium and long-term projects. In speaking with our business administrator, Alex McDonald, Frank and I learned that our township never decreases budgets. Our local government never does a look back to understand how we spent money and whether it was done in an intelligent, efficient manner. Our township should institute zero-based budgeting so that each year we understand that which services are no longer necessary, and to identify where cost savings can be achieved while still maintaining a high level of service. One recent example that affected residents adversely was when animal control services in our town were cut. This was presented as a cost savings because it freed up 2 DPW employees and the replacement service was cheaper than the cost of 2 employees. However, these 2 employees were still kept on the payroll, so it was actually a cost increase. To make matters worse, the new animal control service was outsourced and provided an unacceptable low quality of service. Many residents complained about having to drag their carcasses to the curb, as well as unresponsive call centers in remote locations. Any changes to service providers must be intensely scrutinized so that taxpayers are receiving the best bang for their buck. Here, I do have to commend Diane for standing up for the Essex County Democratic machine in refusing to make the appointments demanded of her. But I do not agree with her most recent statement at Township Committee meetings where she has proposed raising taxes for what seems to be pet projects devoid of any long-term strategy or planning. Proper fiscal responsibility begins with a deep understanding of exactly what we will get for our tax dollars. We must never put the cart before the horse. Thank you.
Thank you, Oyin. So we're moving to the fourth question, also the last prepared question. So the last question prepared is, Hurricane Ida devastated a part of the Millburn community and revealed serious challenges in flood storm mitigation infrastructure. Please share your understanding of our town's flood mitigation efforts and progress since Ida and any improvement plans, also budget proposals you have. For this question, Michael and Annette will go first, followed by Oyin and Frank. Dan and David will go last.
Thank you. As I've said in the past, I feel our flood mitigation committee is doing an outstanding job. They just marked their 1-year anniversary. I'm happy that our current township committee has been working with the city of Orange, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward with the much needed work at the Orange Reservoir. As a former Red Cross member of the Red Cross disaster team, it's important to stress emergency preparedness to our residents. We have to do our part in protecting our families and our homes. And we just need to continue to go to the county, to the state for grants, look for grants to help us with whatever costs incurred to handle our flood mitigation.
I would just like to add that the Flood Mitigation Committee is looking at the town as a whole. And while I would think most people are pretty familiar with the fact that it's the downtown and the South Mountain area that have experienced flooding, the Flood Mitigation Committee, by having representatives of people from throughout the town, are also looking at the Glenwood area, which is a rather unknown area that receives flooding, certainly along Millburn Avenue. And they're looking at various solutions to address that. And I fully support that as well.
Thank you. Frank and Oyin.
My plan to improve flood mitigation would be to engage all residents of our community to help solve our problems, not just select ones with special interests. I want to give a quick example of some low-hanging fruit that could have mitigated flooding in our downtown during Ida. Here is a picture of a car and a dumpster stuck under the Millburn Avenue Bridge after Ida last year. As you can see, the area through which the water could flow is greatly reduced. One simple fix for this would have been to install angled grates designed to lift and deflect debris, wildlife, and even people caught in the raging waters. It would also ensure that there are no bottlenecks preventing the flow of water. Now, I'm not a hydraulic engineer, but after speaking with a resident who is a hydraulic engineer, I learned that this is an easy and low-cost solution that could have significantly alleviated some of the downtown flooding last year. This particular resident had raised this solution to the Township Committee years ago, but it fell on deaf ears. We have access to world-class talent across an impressive breadth of disciplines. Why would we choose to ignore these residents? We must make a better effort at including all voices. Often the best solution is reached through broad community engagement, not simply just throwing money at the problem. As for the budget, we must always understand the range of proposed solutions before making any budgeting decisions. All proposed budget increases must be properly justified and vetted. Oyin? Oyin, you're muted.
Sorry. We must be more proactive in our efforts and devote funds to prevention where it makes sense. We must identify and review all options for flood-prone areas and help our residents and businesses make the right decision on safety plans, insurance, and home relocations when appropriate. On the night of Hurricane Ida, I was at the Township Committee meeting. Knowing the storm was fast approaching, the TC should have canceled the meeting. I would never put our citizens in harm's way the way they did. Safety of our citizens is our first responsibility as elected officials. I helped rescue a resident who was stranded in the raging flood waters on Millburn Avenue while on my way to pick up my son in Summit. He was grateful beyond words. That night and the days after will remain in my memory forever. Mayor Purpose focused on the downtown businesses that were devastated, and rightly so. But I have rescued a man and seen what was happening to his home, went to the next day to Locust Street in South Mountain to witness the devastated residential area there. One home had 10 feet of water covering their basement, first and second floors. I immediately got word out via Facebook Live to township officials that these homes were destroyed and help was needed immediately. The following day, the mayor and other officials toured the area and the process of help began for those families.
Thank you. So last then, David.
Thank you, Eden. We've had a number of committed, passionate residents working on the Millburn Township Flood Mitigation Committee. The progress has been slow, however, drainage projects have been started on 2 of the 4 lots in the South Mountain section where I live. These have been done to remove water from a future event. This, unfortunately, is not the proactive measure we need to take as a governing body to address our entire community's municipal stormwater management plan. The township needs to appoint a technically qualified representative to work along with the newly retained hydrology firm on the Rahway River Mayor's Council. This individual must be consistent, not changing every year, properly represent Millburn Township's interests continually. The combined lobbying efforts and multiple years of council work have produced 4 alternatives to address and prevent continued flooding events along the 2 counties, Essex and Union, that contain the Rahway River. This is not a one neighborhood issue. It will have long-term effects on our property values throughout the community if left unresolved. The resident and commercial property owners and stakeholders need this to be a priority for the Township Committee. We agree. Millburn Township must aggressively pressure Essex County to invest some of the $40 million we pay the county government towards addressing the property ownership issue. We are stakeholders here, not Essex County boss Joe DiVincenzo. This may include lobbying the state government as well as to allocate funds already received in Trenton from the federal government's $12.3 billion rescue plan to assist stormwater management along the Rahway River. The Army Corps of Engineers may need to be re-engaged. Finally, we must be strident as a governing body to require all new developments within our township adhere or exceed the newly advanced stringent stormwater management standards required by the state to perfect and flooding mitigation and improve flooding mitigation in downstream properties. Thank you.
And I would just like to add, it was Tara and myself that initiated the Flood Mitigation Committee. And unfortunately, Mr. Wasserman and Mr. Vinayak played politics, removed us from the chair, and then refused to put anyone representation from the downtown, which was devastated. And we were at a joint rec committee meeting last week, and we were looking at pictures from behind the middle school field. And I alerted Alex McDonald that the middle school field and the joint rec must be part of the flood management team, which they were not put on. So this is a really serious situation, because if those trees and the fence falls in, we have a dam and a backlog. So this is all about experience and knowing and seeing what goes on in town, which I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, David. So this concludes our prepared question section. Next, we'll move to the audience Q&A session. If you have any questions, please submit your questions through the chat box. We'll have time for 2 questions. Candidates, please raise your hand to answer questions so I can see it on my screen. I'll pick the one who raised hand first. Okay, I got first question in. So the first question I got from the audience that we understand that you're running because you perceive the need for improvements for the township committee. Still, we want to ask you what common ground you find between yourself and current township committee members on specific policy proposals. How do you see yourself getting beyond finger pointing negative politics and build bipartisan consensus?
Aren't
Did you raise your hand? Oh, I don't see your hands raising. You know, in the reaction, you can raise your hand. Okay, I don't see any hands raising. So, Oyen, you're the first.
I'll let Diane go.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll be brief. This is a great question. As the only incumbent, I have experienced being yelled at our meetings, and believe me, no one up there likes it. So why would I run again? Because I know we can do better. This never happened during my first term, nor when I was mayor. We had 2 public comment periods and decorum. I believe there was a shift when the committee became under one-party control. This seemed to inflame Republicans who perhaps felt disenfranchised. It also forced party loyalty at the forefront. These factors combined have led us where we are. I believe that if we take the partisanship and the desire for party control out of town politics, we will all be better off. We are listening, and there's always room for improvement, starting with not talking down to our constituents as our current mayor does. When our residents know we have their best interests at heart, they will behave accordingly. I would like to add that policy is not made by bullying on Facebook or social media. Please attend our meetings in person. Please introduce yourself, talk to us. We are very approachable. I want to meet the residents as I have over the past 6 years. Thank you.
Oyen, you want to go next? And I saw also Annette and Michael will go next. Oyen, you go.
Thank you. Our number one issue is revising the Fair Share Housing Settlement Agreement so that it does not bring undue harm to our community and lead to overcrowding of our schools. You know, Frank and I agreed that the firing of Attorney Buzak was a necessary first step in this process. Our campaign was instrumental in sharing evidence that led to his dismissal. We also produced the analysis that computed the potential impact of the agreement by contrasting our agreement with those of similarly situated towns. You know, we also showed that we got a terrible deal. We agree with Tara Purpose that this agreement must be revisited to reach a fairer outcome for our town and all residents. We agree that the income segregated housing project at the town dump is not appropriate for our town, and we must fight to stop it.
I'd like to begin by addressing the criticisms that our opponents continue to lob at us, because they are not valid. The Democratic candidates have resorted to name-calling and the politics of personal destruction. These candidates know nothing about us or our lived experiences, and to carelessly toss false accusations in our direction is downright offensive. During the summer of 2020, due to the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes spurred on by vitriol coming from the White House, my husband Jerry was terrified of leaving the house to run basic errands like grocery shopping. To this day, he must look over his shoulder when walking alone in the city or when waiting on the subway platform. I want to be crystal clear on this. I disavow all divisive rhetoric, and I'm offended that anyone would try to associate me with it. Our opponents' continued use of false epithets to label our campaign is itself a divisive tactic, meant to tear apart the fabric of our community. They should be ashamed of their behavior. Other candidates have labeled us fearmongers for stating that the settlement agreement allows for the construction of more than 4,000 households, up to a 70% increase. We have been very clear in our communications that this increase is up to. I encourage everyone to read the content that is posted on our website, oyenandfrank.com. The data backups and videos are there for all to see. We intend to provide a better way forward for our community. Oyen and I come from a scientific and engineering backgrounds. We understand the importance of using data to guide decision-making. Critical thinking and consensus building are 2 of the core competencies we have honed from professional experience, and we will bring these skills to the Township Committee. We also pledge to listen to all residents, not just those of certain political affiliations. I have stated publicly at multiple Township Committee meetings that there needs to be a second round of public comment meetings. We must work with these residents, not against them. Thank you.
Okay, so the question I heard was, what common ground do you have with the township committee, which I didn't see in any of those answers. So I'll answer the question I heard. The common ground that we have is that we support the efforts that the township committee has taken with respect to public safety, and that being the addition of the license plate cameras to try to reduce the car thefts, as well as we've already discussed, the actions that they've taken to help resolve flooding. As for decorum at the meetings, that is one of our keystone principles. I've worked in the corporate world for many years, and I've never seen business meetings run the way that they are. In addition to the fact that the decorum is called into question by people from the audience, it's also called into question from the people on the dais. And that's one thing that will be different. We will be respectful. If we're elected, we'll be respectful of the other 3 members of the township committee, even when we disagree. Thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. So one more question. Actually, we have few questions from the audience, but giving, I just said we have 2 questions audience, so I'll just pick the one that a couple people asked. So the next question is, given the overwhelming consensus of Millburn residents feel that the DPW project is the most disastrous part of the fair share settlement, would you commit to vigorously fighting this settlement agreement? And what steps would you take to fight it?
Okay.
Okay,
Go
yeah,
answer
that's
that.
the easy way. Go ahead. David, yeah, that's the easy way, Ben. Look for the Zoom.
Yeah, there's no, unfortunately, there's no raised hand function here, so
Yeah,
So we have the hand.
we're
real
using the
hand.
actual.
let's go with the traditional way. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course, we know the DPW is the most egregious part of the settlement. Because nobody was included in Mr. Wasserman's and Miss Miggins' closed door negotiation. We don't even know how that got into play. It's not even part of our RDP.
It's a throw-in.
Yeah, it was a throw-in. It was supposed to take away from something else that's still there. And now that Tara and I will be on the negotiating committee, we will understand how things are going to happen. The only way, and this is very, very clear, the only way to modify and tweak the settlement is to offer another plan. And this plan must be derived from a planner who knows Millburn's vacant land and what we have available. It must be approved and agreed to by Fair Share Housing, and it goes to the special master. It's not a very simple process. It's very complicated, and you have to have experience in knowing really how this law works. So it's not a wish and a prayer. It's a very serious situation that must be modified and tweaked, that is allowed by the law and what the judge will accept. And the DPW, the way that was put into our plan is absolutely egregious and obviously, I don't think anybody is for that. I've not heard from one resident who would appreciate if that plan was kept as is.
Yeah, one of the main issues is that we all have consensus that was the biggest failure in the settlement agreement was the building of a income segregated unit on toxic land. It was a throw-in as part of the settlement. It was made up for the disproportionate zoning overlays, which were part of a personal agenda by the 2 individuals who sat behind the closed door and had some, what we all know now was some questionable guidance from our legal counsel. We're committed to rework that. We have an opportunity now to make a substantive argument legally. We're going to undertake that process. I believe no matter who is, well, I believe if most are elected. Thank you.
And also Annette, and then Frank.
So I think we have to wait until the hearing in December to see ultimately what the judge says. But I also agree. I don't think that we're going to be able to build if the site is toxic. So I do agree that it wasn't the best plan. The settlement itself was not the best plan. And I, if elected, want to take a hard look at our professionals. And I'm not going to go, there's no Essex County machine that's going to tell us who to hire. So that's all false. So that's how I feel.
And I just want to address the question of income segregated. While that's clearly not an ideal situation, an alternative that I understand was proposed, because obviously we were not a part of the negotiations, was that instead of the 75 units in the as it currently is, the alternative was to take over the entire site, including where all the buildings are, the offices are, and build something that was 375 units. So 300 market rate, still the 75 affordable, and that was the alternative. It would not be income segregated. However, it would be even more traffic and even more students in the schools. So while this is not an ideal situation by any means, 375 units there would have been even worse.
Thank you. Frank?
So the DPW project is disastrous, and Oyen and I commit to stopping it. In fact, our campaign is the team that went and did extra homework and found that contaminated soils from leaking underground fuel storage tanks from around the municipality were actually dumped there and then paved over. And this fact was conveniently left out of the 1,000+ page environmental report. Our team is the one that went to Trenton, reviewed the documents, and discovered this. Now, Diane was on the Township committee. I would have thought that maybe she should have done her homework prior to signing this terrible agreement. Had she done her homework, she would have maybe discovered this along with the other irregularities that we discovered. The other thing that troubles me is that it now seems that Diane and David are saying that they're against the dump project, when you can actually see on their website, there's videos where Diane suggests that perhaps they should use the entirety of the DPW space to build an even larger complex where it would have 50% market rate and 50% affordable. So then David just now seemed to imply that the site was contaminated. I don't see how you can have it both ways. If the site is contaminated, then it shouldn't be built on. So which I don't know which they're advocating for, because they seem to contradict themselves. But I also, this goes back to the lack of experience. Prior to signing that agreement, the Township Committee members should have done proper due diligence on the site. They should have figured out whether it was able to be built on or not. They should have done the environmental reports before signing the agreement. And if Diane thought there was any concern, she should have raised red flags then. I don't know why anyone would have thought it'd be a good idea to build residential housing on the DPW site. Also, where would we put the DPW site? It would be very expensive to relocate it, and we don't really have a good spot in town to move it to. Where it is right now is where it needs to be, because when there's a storm, the trucks can fan outward from the center of town. If you move it to the edge of the town, that's going to be problematic. So Oyen and I commit to hiring a new planner in addition to new attorneys, and then working with the planner and the new legal counsel to come up with a strategy to make sure that we don't have to build on the dump. And in fact, on our website, we've even detailed plans where we would, through the use of overlay zones and a modification of the existing overlay zones, meet all of the constitutionally mandated numbers that we need to for affordable housing without having to build on the dump. So we feel that we're the only team that's actually offered a concrete plan to avoid building on the dump. I haven't seen this from any of the other candidates. So I think it's important that everyone keep that in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Thank you for all candidates for participation. Now we are ending the forum with a closing statement from each candidate. For a closing statement, each candidate has 2 minutes. The order is as follows: Annette, Michael, and then Dan, David, and Oyen and Frank. Go ahead.
I want to thank the Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association again for hosting tonight. Michael and I have talked to thousands of residents over the past 6 months. We've attended 3 forums and hosted our own town hall. This midterm election is very important, both locally and nationally. Michael and I are being targeted as the candidates in favor of overdevelopment and building on a toxic dump, when the reality is, again, that the Republican-controlled Township Committee did nothing for over 30 years. to prepare for 30 years to prepare us for where we are today. Let's also take a look at their platform, calling for partisan government. This coming from the candidates that have raised over $30,000 from the state Republican Party, and they're running on the Republican line. You can't have it both ways. And to further confuse residents and the voters, the Republican chair, Mary McNett, has started the Republican recall. Let's call it what it is. We have emails that she sent to the town clerk for instructions on how to start a recall. The independent candidate is also crying about overdevelopment. She's in her second term, 1 year as mayor. And what did she do to address the future of our community? Nothing. And also, let's not forget our opponents all took money from developers, whether local or not. Early voting has started. If you haven't voted by mail, you can cast your vote now at the Education Center over by Turtleback Zoo, or vote in person on November 8th. Michael and I humbly ask you for your support to bring civility back to the Township Committee and work towards the future of Millburn Township in a calm and sensible way. I also want to add that our Flood Mitigation Committee is made up of Republican and Democratic citizens. When I first tried to get on committees 25 years ago, I couldn't get onto a committee because I was a Democrat and the Township Committee was all.
All right, Annette, your time is up.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if the 2 minutes was for both of us. Okay. So in closing, adding on to what Annette said, it's important that this election is important, and obviously you can find us on line A. We are people that are both good listeners, we're calm people, and we pledge to bring a sense of decorum and civility back to the Township Committee meetings. We have the relationships with the other levels of government all the way, between the state legislature and also with the governor to help facilitate some of the things that we've talked about today, including working to have better affordable housing rules. I want to thank the Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association for hosting this event, and please remember to go out and vote. Thank you.
Hi. First, I'd like to say if the DPW site is contaminated, that is under the jurisdiction of the New Jersey DEP, and they will never allow anything to be built on it once the contamination is proven. I want to respond to Annette's statement that I absolutely was given names by 4 party bosses for jobs to fill in town hall, as well as Annette asked me to forward her son's resume when there was a job opening in town hall. That is why Dave and I believe there's no place for politics in our local government, party politics. This is a first for our town. It's time to work together, time to stop fighting the partisanship control over our local officials. We can work together and do good work. I have the experience to keep the town moving forward. I do not believe, as do the Democratic candidates, that the fair share housing settlement is okay. I wrote that before they've now changed their mind and they understand it's not okay. But we're all entitled and we should be able to change our minds. But Democratic control and business as usual is no longer acceptable. Municipal governance is not intuitive. It's certainly not data-driven, as the Republicans keep claiming it is. Fear-mongering and inflated numbers disingenuous and is not good for our community. I do not agree. I think they've modified what they said, that we're not going to have a 70% increase in our population and 4,000 apartments built. Nor do I believe, as they do, that Millburn will be in a better position taking fair share housing to court. There's a proper, lawful way to proceed, and that is the correct path we are interested in. We have started the process by terminating the attorney, and we are interviewing for a new attorney who will fight for Millburn. Again, thank you for coming out tonight. We're asking for your vote on line C for independent candidates. Be an independent thinker. Thank you. Good night.
Again, I want to thank the Millburn Chinese Association and the fellow candidates for taking part in tonight's forum.
Thank you.
I must say, Frank, I did not contradict myself, and you being an LSRP should know that's Jerry's provenance. But all that being said, we know that any site can be cleaned up and made ready for development if in fact it's the right site. What we said is a 100% income segregated, poorly thought out plan that was a throw in as part of the settlement agreement doesn't work for the Millburn Township community. That's it. Simply stated, we, the independent candidates, possess the most relative governmental experience, land use, personnel management to tackle Millburn's challenges from the outset. Can Millburn Township accept more unskilled individuals learning as they go, or more partisan party influence? Traffic and pedestrian safety, maintaining educational excellence, protecting property values through stormwater management, and working with stakeholders on sensible, inclusive green development, initiatives on which Diane and I will focus, along with current committee person Tara Prupis, listening and working for the Millburn Township community. We believe our residents want to engage with a progressive, independent governing body in Millburn Short Hills. We will listen and work for you. Join us Tuesday, November 8th, vote line C. Thank you.
And be sure to go to our website, eglomorrow.com. You'll see our endorsement letters and our information. Thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Next, Owen and Frank.
Oyen, you're up.
Oh, sure. I would first like to say that I was the only person out of everyone who stood up against this income segregated housing project over a year ago. And I'm glad that all of our opponents are now following suit to see that this was not a good plan for our community. I would also like to, thank, the Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association once again for hosting this forum. My running mate, Frank, and I represent the most diverse ticket the township has ever had. We believe our township committee must have a diversity of thoughts and ideas to develop a more positive relationship with residents and other stakeholders who are not being consulted on important matters and are being silenced by the township committee. All 5 township committee members, including candidate Diane Eglo, voted in favor of an extremely detrimental fair share affordable housing settlement agreement that will ruin this town if not stopped as is and amended. The Democrat-controlled township committee has used their unchecked power to agree to, but not yet finalized, the worst affordable housing deal in the state of New Jersey. Our future development must meet scale and density standards that preserve Millburn's character and quality of life. Frank and I, if elected, can turn this bad deal around and save Millburn from the negative impacts of the current development plans. It is unconscionable that they haven't done a single impact study as to the downstream implication. We will stop the toxic dump project. We will protect our children's schools and the high quality delivery of Millburn public education. We both have skin in the game with young families and 30 more years to go living here. We pledge to bring decorum, civility, balance, and order to all township committee deliberations. We have worked hard to get to know you and earn your vote. We are the best choice for Millburn's future. Let's make this election about reclaiming our future for our kids and our democracy.
Time is up.
Thank you.
Frank, you want to close us out?
Sure. So Millburn is at a crossroads. We need new leaders who will approach problems with an analytical lens. Oyen and I are the only 2 candidates equipped to do this. Our professional backgrounds in science and engineering give us the skills Millburn needs from its next generation of leaders. Our Democratic opponents will just bring us more of the same, and their blind loyalty to their political machine will continue the disastrous policies our existing township committee has embarked on. Due to their unpopular positions, they resort to personal attacks and spreading outright lies. Diane has been on the township committee for 6 years. During that time, she has made too many poor decisions. It is her inexperience and lack of critical thinking that led her to signing the disastrous settlement agreement. She must be fired, not rehired. Our team's detailed analysis of the settlement agreement has shed light on the risk it poses to our town. Our original research has helped spread awareness of the overdevelopment that looms on the horizon. We have discussed our proposals to scrap the dump project entirely and lower the excessive zoning changes of 40 units per acre with numerous municipal land use attorneys. If our opponents call it some combination of fear-mongering and wishful thinking, Perhaps it is due to their disdain for the data. Furthermore, it is clear that Diane does not understand how arbitration works in our legal system. FairShare does not have all the power in negotiations, because you can always appeal to the judge if they are not negotiating in good faith. I find it telling that she hides her own misunderstanding of the courts by claiming I am inexperienced. Oyen and I have run a positive, fact-based campaign because we are genuinely committed to the long-term future of our town, especially the protection of our exceptional school system. If we haven't already, we hope to earn your support in the final week of this campaign. Please visit our website, oyenandfrank.com, to learn more or to reach out with any questions you may have. When voting, you can find us on line B of the ballot, the better way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. This concludes our forum. So we're lucky to have 6 talented candidates to step up and willing to serve our town. Everyone, please make sure to cast your vote on November 8th. Lastly, we have Wen Li, Vice President of Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association, to make the closing remark.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Wen Li, Vice President of the Millburn Short Hills Chinese Association. We would like to thank the candidates for joining us today and thank the members and their attendance and consideration for each of the candidates and their views. As a reminder, the general election day is Tuesday, November 8th. The association urges all members, and especially today attendees, to go out and cast their votes. If you cannot vote in person, there is the option of a mail-in voting. Just to clarify, each voter can pick any 2 of 6 candidates. They do not have to be on same line of the ballot. If there are any questions you did not get the chance to ask today and would like to contact the candidates directly, we will be happy to share their contact information. Now back to Eden.
Thank you. And good night, everyone. Thank you, candidates. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, what's